Welcome to the Wolf Power Club, the weekly podcast where we discuss energy, industry and politics. I'm your host Alex. I've sold and bought a few companies and also I've sold billions of litres. Join me on this journey to net zero. Download on Apple Podcasts. Season 1 brought to you by AIM Recruit, the leading recruiters in logistics, transport and energy at www.aimrecruit.com. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wolf Power Club podcast. Today we have got friends that are also based in the centre of London like ourselves, but more importantly they travel the world and they really give a unique insight to what's happening in one of the largest and most important parts of the energy sector, and that's storage terminals. So I'm delighted to welcome publisher, leader of Storage Terminals magazine, Greg Emmenis, to the podcast. Welcome, Greg.
Alex, thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor. It's great to actually be on this. I remember we were discussing this at Ukifida in Liverpool, and I since the day you mentioned it, I was thinking this is going to be really fun. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we want to give some fun to the viewers, and let's give it a go. So I think I first like to start off a bit about yourself, Greg. How on earth have you ended up in this position?
Well, firstly, I want to apologize in advance because being a salesperson, I do chat a lot. So I did have my wife give me a pre-briefing before this and say, look, Greg, I know you love a chat, but you've got to minimize your time. So I'm going to try and answer this in the best way that I can, in the shortest way that I can. I moved to London from South Africa originally. My mom's Welsh, dad's English. So I'm British, essentially. So you don't want to be in my household when the rugby's on, especially World Cup, Welsh, English, South African. But I moved to London for a year to have a gap year before I moved back to South Africa to study corporate communications. Evidently, I got a job as a security guard. And you wouldn't believe it if you saw me in real life. You'd think, how did this little guy become a security guard? But,
I'm laughing a bit because I have met Greg in real life. And I think it's fair to say he'd be a very tactical security guard rather than a physical one.
Tactical being the operative word. I agree with you. Very tactical. But they didn't give me the position of stopping people at the door. It was more like a reception job. I think they chose their battles wisely. But I worked at a company called Informer as a security guard, security receptionist, if you want to call it that, and became friends with a gentleman known as Tom Connor, who up to today, just the best salesperson I've ever met. Unbelievable. And we became friends, and he was saying to me, look, Greg, what do you want to do one day? And I said to him, I'd love to get into communications, publishing, advertising. And he said, well, do you have a degree? Have you studied? I was like, not yet. He's like, oh, I'm going to save you 5 years of your life. And I said, how so? He said, well, actually one of the bosses here, and I'd like to hire you. And I said, really? And he's like, yeah, I want to take you from, reception job to an advertising job. I was like, what about my qualifications? He's like, ask no questions, hear no lies. Let's go, right? So I worked on a newspaper called Fishing News. I was selling advertising spaces to trawlermen, which is great, because if you can sell an advert promoting cockles and mussels, you can sell anything. I promise you.
Yeah, forget ice to Eskimos, hey? Cockles to fishermen, I love it.
But I remember this like it was yesterday, Alex.
Amazing.
I started on the Thursday. That following Tuesday, I arrived at the office, and there was a piece of paper on my desk with 27 countries. Turkey, Brazil, Dubai, America, Canada,
Amazing.
You name it. And my boss at the time, who's actually one of my best friends now, is actually the best man in my wedding, Kalpesh, said, these are the countries we want you to go to and promote the magazine to. And essentially what you're going to be talking about is why it's beneficial to advertise in this magazine to promote companies within the storage terminals market.
Amazing.
And I was like, the what? I mean, I don't know what storage terminals were. I'd never heard of these things before, which I should have done my homework before applying for a job in a magazine that covers dangerous goods. But, you learn on the way, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I guess my first time at a storage terminal, slightly similar. I got a job at a company called Mabanaft, which is one of the biggest wholesalers in the UK, and I
Yeah,
kind of always wanted to know everything about a product. It came from like when I was a student. I know they get a bad rap, double glazing salesman, but actually I started off as a student double glazing salesman. And one of the things we learned in double glazing is know all your products. So like as a 16-year-old, I could tell you about a triple threaded window and a double glass window. And I've actually taken a similar approach to all jobs I did. So when I got the job at Mabanath, my first call was, well, if I'm selling fuel from these terminals to these coach companies and big waste companies, I want to see it. And I never forget going down to Gray's New Star as my first terminal. And the guys were brilliant at Gray's. They showed me everything from the jetty to the tanks and so on. But just before we go into that, because I want to touch more on the actual terminal part in a second, what then kept the passion? Because there's one thing getting that awesome 27 list of countries, but what kept your passion in the industry and sort of leading yourself to being the man in storage terminals?
well, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Big vote of confidence. Um, I would say people. You go into an industry, and I think you fall in love with it based on the people you get to meet, because you people are essentially what makes the world go round. When I started, I was 19 years old. I knew nothing about the industry, let alone life or anything in between that. So I had a lot of the people that up to today are clients that actually literally were there before I was engaged, married, had children. So you meet them at literally grassroots level, and they were great. They took the time to teach me about the industry, life lessons. I was traveling on my own. They were showing me different parts of the world and saying, "Look, you're in Turkey now. Let's go and look at a few different places." Or, you go to Abu Dhabi and they're like, "Have you seen some of the mosques?" And or you go to America to Houston and saying, "Look, let's go and take a day trip to NASA." Just people that made you feel very welcome straight away. And the strangest thing is, I'm turning 40 in January, and I was thinking back at how good people have been, and I'm more passionate about the industry now than I ever have been because I understand more of it now. I'm still learning every day, of course, but as it stands, it's just a brilliant industry. It really is. Amazing people, really cool.
I think what you've touched on there, and it leads nicely to us talking about terminals itself, is that what's amazing about things like storage terminals is that it doesn't matter what language people speak, it doesn't matter what culture you come from. If you've got a form of liquid energy in your country, there is going to be a storage terminal network. And I saw
It's
this
true.
when last year I was on shared parental leave, and with the family we went to Alaska. And while everyone else was looking out for grizzlies and these bald-headed eagles and stuff, I was just like loving the fact that there we were in a place that you can only get to by biplane or cruise ship. And there was a stunning storage terminal. And I
Yeah.
was like saying to my little one, "Oh, that's what daddy loves. It's a good old storage terminal." And my wife was just like wetting herself that there was all this beautiful environment around in Alaska. And there I was looking at the terminal. So it goes nicely in. For our listeners who are from other parts of the energy industry, what essentially is a storage terminal, and could you also sort of say why therefore you've had to like travel around the world to see them?
Well, I guess as I think a lot of people that even in our industry aren't educated, everyone's in somewhat educated about the energy industry, right? The energy industry is one of the most, if not the most lucrative industry in the world, but based on the fact that you'll always need it. I mean, to answer the question about what storage terminals are, to simplify it, it's these massive containers that store products, liquids, and gases. I think I was thinking about this question very carefully because we've actually been asked this quite a few times. And I think the best way to answer it is storage terminals are obviously and do play a very vital role in energy and commodity supply chain, if you want to simplify it. So they're obviously important to ensure that markets find their balance in the most price efficient way. I think that's the best way I can try and explain it in terms of why are storage tanks so important. They store energy. in whichever form it comes in. And the world is always going to need energy. It's really that simple. I mean, I hope it comes across as simple as I'm explaining it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's great. And for my side, Greg, for a huge part of my career, I ran trucks and tankers out of these terminals and the sales teams that filled those trucks and tankers. But I think for anyone who hasn't been to one, a good example, there's a number of terminals in the Thames Basin that essentially supply all the liquid fuel to the south of England, predominantly everything inside the M25, but also to the south of England to hit the likes of Portsmouth and Bristol and Cardiff. But essentially, from within about a 3-hour drive, most terminals will have Arctics anywhere in the world collecting fuel and delivering it, whether it's petrol stations or whether it's data banks, powering systems. And I think a figure that I saw that I think will blow people's mind. I remember on products like heating oil, on your quietest day, you might have 3 tankers going out with it. On your busiest day, you'll have something like 150 tankers going
it's
out
quite
with it.
remarkable, isn't it?
And I love it when people are like, well, how do you manage on averages? And I'm like, it's a good question. It's quite
But I'm sure you'll
stressful.
agree. It's one of those things where once you understand, it's like anything. Once you understand something, you enjoy it more. So you arrive in the storage terminal market, you see these big tanks, but when you first start, you don't really realize how awesome they actually are. I mean, in terms of coatings and linings, technology, automation systems. Of course, the human factor, as always, is the most important. Safety is really important. One of our clients, Regen Robotics, they do no-man entry robotics for tank cleaning. And when you go to the control unit to obviously drive or ride or control these tank cleaning units, it literally looks like a fighter jet on the inside. You've got this really cool joystick and buttons and control pad. Sort of you're feeling like you're Maverick from Top Gun, or in my case, Goose. But it's really cool because when you understand the industry more, you understand how important it really is and what it does for the world and the world markets. I remember I knew I married the right person when we were flying to Rotterdam, and she pointed out Vopak storage tanks, and I was like, "You're the one," because as you fly into Port of Rotterdam, there's a beautiful tank farm, and she's like, "Are those storage tanks?" I was like, "Yes, they are." And she goes, "Vopak's a client, right?" So I was like, "Yes, they are."
That is truly
More
love.
reader than anything, but yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. Even when we drive to conferences like we did to Ukifta and the Tank Storage Association, I love it that we can see how many tankers we can spot and how many clients. Like Hoya, for example.
Yeah.
It's going to be good luck trip when you spot a Hoya road tanker on the road.
I also I remember when I was a Shell graduate, they took us out on a boat and we did the 13 kilometers of the Rotterdam and Pernis estate of the various different companies. And it's just mind blowing because for those who don't know, that's a big supply location for Northern Europe. I think that leads nicely. We've talked about the importance of storage terminals to energy across the world. We've obviously touched on a number of countries, but you came up with this thing of the top 100. And just before we go into your thoughts, how it came about, and we really go into the details, when I saw this at Ukifta, I absolutely loved it because I think I've
Thank
always
you.
been someone that loves charts and rankings. Like I love in sports, like tennis and golf, where you've got like the money league of who's achieved what in their rankings, or the points that come out each Monday in tennis of who's where in the top 100 of the ATP. I always loved that American saying of like most valuable player and all that sort of stuff in
Yeah.
terms of ranking stuff.
Yeah.
And then I remember like in Nick Hornby's book, High Fidelity, the record shop boys are always talking about their top fives of everything in life. And I was thinking, wow, that is my life. I love ranking things in top fives. I'm not saying it's the only way you can measure things, but you guys have put together a top 100. Where did the idea come from? And let's go into because I believe it's about to come out this August, and it's a really exciting thing that you guys have published, and it's a beautiful document, and I loved it, like reading about it and seeing the guys. So yeah, how did the top 100 for storage terminals come about?
Well, thank you so much. That's really kind. The team can't really hear this, so I'll take all the credit for it. No one can. I know I shouldn't, but there's no witnesses, So no, we meet a lot of interesting people, and I've been in the industry for a while, and as you can hear, I'm a talkative guy. I love meeting people. I'll talk to anyone about anything, whether you build terminals, valves, automation, you name it. I'll talk to you. And everyone's got a story. Everyone's got something fascinating about them. And what I found really interesting was I looked at all these people that we deal with on a daily basis: advertisers, readers, CEOs, everything in between. And we sat one day at an event and thought, wouldn't it be cool to actually ask them more about the industry and get to understand their personal insights? I mean, one of the best ones we had was Phil McAvoy, the managing director of Terminals. And I loved it when he said, I run a successful terminal company, and I've studied, and, I've got a great family. But one thing I'm very proud of is that I can bench 110 kilograms. And
The Arnie
which
of the storage
I loved
terminals.
it. I loved it because instantly it humanizes, an MD, because, Phil's a great guy, don't get me wrong. And so are the rest of them. But what I loved about that is you sometimes forget that these important people are human. They've got everyday good and bad days. When they run a terminal or when they're running a company, not every day is going to be peachy and pie. Not every day is going to run smoothly. So I sat thinking, wouldn't it be cool to interview these people and find out their thoughts of everything about the industry, the direction of the market, and the nice thing about it is we knew we were going to get conflicting answers, which is great because, friction creates fire that sparks debate. I mean, you running a podcast and being very personable, you know that better than anyone. It's great when you have difference of opinion because then you learn something. Somebody might tell you something you didn't think of or haven't heard of. So we thought, imagine you took 100 of the most influential people, put them in one guide, and let's see what happens. And dare I say, it changed the company. It changed our lives. I mean, when this guide came out a few months ago, it was just mind blowing. We received more media packs, subscriptions, requests than in the 20 years I've been in publishing. On one day, we received 67 media pack requests and readership requests to subscribe to the magazine. And granted, we're in a very niche industry. That's, it's on Facebook numbers, but, for a niche publication, we're really proud of that. But what we liked about it is people are still talking about the top 100 up to today. Literally up to today. We were actually at a conference in Cartagena, the Petrochemicals Global Logistics Conference, and they actually had a top 100 panel, which we were very fortunate enough to chair and speak to some of the influencers like Paul Vught from Standec, Eddie Misman, who runs the European division of Intertech. We got to speak to a lot of good people there and why they featured and why they enjoyed being featured. And it was cool because you had these influential people, but we got to speak to them one-on-one in a very down-to-earth, very relaxed, quite similar to this, really. And I learned so much. I think the team learned so much about our actual clients and readers and the people that actually use STM and what they think of the market. And it was great. It was really cool. I mean, the project was definitely my favorite. I shouldn't be biased, but it's definitely my favorite.
I think that's perfect because I think on the podcast where we're at is we like the energy sector to support human behavior. We don't think it will change human behavior. And what we mean by that is that, and this hugely relevant storage terminals, is that when we were at Farnborough last week, we had lots of different opinions about where energy's going on aviation.
Yeah.
But I think where everyone was clear, well, human beings aren't going to give up holiday. And actually, I think what's fascinating is that with COVID, obviously for a period of time, everyone went to Zoom or virtual interviews or virtual meetings. But what's amazing is I've got a friend who actually works for the Underground, and he was saying that back up to 98% of physical travel that they were in 2019, the last year before COVID. And so it just shows that whether it's aviation travel, whether it's train travel, it's car travel, people need to meet other people. And this idea that you can just take fuel away from powering that people engagement isn't going to happen. And I'd probably agree with your poll. There's going to be parts of the sector that can come greener. There's other parts of the sector where actually just the fundamental that piece of equipment or piece of transport has to do means there always be some kind of liquid fuel to support it. Hence why you're always going to have storage terminals, and the products might change slightly, but essentially it will be a liquid form of fuel that powers them. And final thing for all of our listeners, what's the best way to stay in touch with Storage Terminals magazine? Obviously, you said you're on LinkedIn, but the actual magazine itself, is it a subscription website? Just tell us, listeners, that the best way to stay in touch and follow.
Well, thank you for asking. We're actually a free subscription-based publication. The reason for that is nowadays you can find information almost anywhere. So we are on a free subscriber base in the sense that we send out a digital edition for free. If somebody wants to subscribe to the print edition, there are print subscriptions. But I must be honest, Alex, most people now opt for digital. We still have print magazines at all the events we go to, as you know, Chiquifida and Stock Expo, ILTA, and there's some all the events we attend. But it's quite remarkable that nowadays you can push a button and have over 38,000 recipients receive a link to your publication, and you can track it and everything, which is really cool. You know, reader habits, not too big brotherish, but to get in touch with us, we are on LinkedIn. We are. You can visit us at storageterminalsmag.com. Please note, myself and the whole team are very responsive. We take great pride at that. Um, in addition to that, if you have stories, if there's something you want to speak about, we write about all aspects of the market. I mean, there's nothing we don't write about storage tank related. So when we get a request saying, what won't you write about in the storage tank market? As long as it's not hate speech related or, we have to be very careful with political conversations that I'm sure you can
Correct.
appreciate.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the nitty gritty side of the industry, we write about the nuts and bolts, guys. We write about the industry. We write about the commercial endeavors, the financial side of it. There's nothing that we pretty much don't cover on the storage terminals market. So if anyone wants to find us, please feel free to go to LinkedIn or visit our website, or
Brilliant.
of
Well,
course email us, and we'll be happy to get back to you.
I gotta say to our viewers, it really is a beautiful copy. It's like
Oh, thank you
I've got
so
the
much.
hardback. I thought I'd save it to the end to show my fanboy thing. It was very, very cool. You kifter. Greg and the team were getting people in the top 100 that are there to sign it, and I think they've taken it all around the world to get it signed. And in the February party, that you'll see one physical one that's been signed by the whole top 100, which is very cool. I really, really like to thank you for your time today, Greg. I think all of us have learnt a huge amount about from international travels of this teenager who started off as a fierce security guard in the Informer office in London, and then has gone round the world talking storage terminals. I think also on a very important point, the energy thing, as you said, where there is energy need, where there's liquid fuel need, you need a storage terminal supplying that part of geography or that city or so on, and it's fantastic. And I think you've tapped into human behaviour like no one else I know in the energy sector. I
Oh,
think
thank
we
you.
all love a top 100, and what I really think would be awesome is at some point we end up with like a top trump style of the storage terminals, so you can play a card game of for those listeners who weren't kids growing up in Britain, there was a game called Top Trumps that has 4 or 5 categories of like power. Normally it was done with footballers or supercars, but I think now you've got the top 100 storage terminals. There's an elite that gets down to the 52 pack of cards, and I think it.
I think it's next on the agenda, top trumps. But we did laugh because when people said to us, "How is the top 100 ranked?" We were like alphabetically. I think some people were so desperate to be number one they were going to change their surnames. Luckily, it didn't get to that. We had to keep it alphabetical, otherwise, because I mean, it's like if somebody said, just to end it off, that we get asked this question all the time. It's probably the most frequent question: who is the biggest terminal company on earth? You would almost never be able to answer that because it depends. When you're talking about size, capacity, how
Profit,
much
yeah.
money they make, operation. I mean, it's very ambiguous. But Alex, I wanted to say thank you so much to yourself and Adam for, of course, having me on your podcast. And you've been great. I've really, really enjoyed it, even with my few technological hiccups that I've had. And it was obviously great to meet you. And I think the podcast is really interesting. I'm definitely going to let everyone know about it, not just because I was on it. um, but I do. You said you're going to have segments on what was going on with Russia and the good year that they had in terms of everything, and the Nigerian stuff, and of course everything else you're speaking about. I find this stuff very interesting, and I know our readers find all of this very interesting. So we're looking forward to obviously hearing who else you have on, and yeah, of course, letting everyone know about it. It's a fantastic podcast, and I can't thank you enough for having me.
Thank you very much, Greg.